In case you missed it, just about an hour and a half ago, Thomas Massey, Ro Khanna, and, shockingly, Marjorie Taylor Greene stood on the Capitol steps with a handful of survivors who were victimized and trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And you don't see a bipartisan display like that every day, but what followed was heart-wrenching. It was powerful. It was triggering for someone who is a survivor of rape like myself. It was heartbreaking, and it was illuminating. And their stories that we'd never heard before. I'd never heard most of their stories before. Some of them had never told their stories before, because sharing these stories can be really scary. And Olivia and I talk about it in the episode to come. I have struggled to tell my own story, and listening to these women one after the next stand up there and put on, a display of bravery was really something to behold, and a commentary on our times. While that was happening, by, I'm sure, no coincidence, military jets were buzzing overhead repeatedly, back and forth, to the point where they couldn't talk. They had to be quiet while the planes went overhead. And if you think that was just some happenstance, then you don't know who Donald Trump, or Pete Hegseth for that matter, is. And that is reprehensible and disgusting, but not surprising. Several of the victims actually named Donald Trump. They didn't say that he participated in any of the abuse, but they did name him. And he followed that up with a press conference in the Oval Office where he once again called their experiences a Democratic hoax. And that's bullshit. So Olivia and I are going to get into some of this. But with that, welcome to Sanish. I'm Jo, and today I am absolutely hyped to welcome a guest who's got more courage and hotter takes than most politicians twice her age, Olivia Julianna. You know Olivia for her relentless activism, her viral clapbacks, and the way she puts Gen Z power front and center on every screen that matters. Right now, as the news spins out with fresh attacks on our democracy, Olivia isn't just watching from the sidelines. She's organizing, mobilizing, and pissing off all the right people. Looking at you, Matt Gaetz, which is why we need her voice in this moment more than ever. So get comfortable, because we're about to talk truth, strategy, burnout, and why hope has to be loud if we want to have any shot at sanity. But before we get going, I want to tell you about one of our partners here at Sanish. Have you ever Googled yourself just to see what shows up? What's out there about you? Well, I did that recently. It's scary, friends. My phone number, old addresses, there was even stuff about my family. Honestly, it's terrifying. And doing what I do, it's definitely best that all my information isn't just floating out there. That's why I've partnered with Incogni. It has helped me take control of my online privacy by removing my data from shady people search sites, broker databases, etc. Incogni is basically a digital hitman for your data. It hunts down all the shady sites, and poof, your personal info disappears. So you just sign up, give them permission to act on your behalf, and boom, they go out and demand that data brokers delete your personal info. And it doesn't just do that and walk away. Incogni also continuously monitors to see if your data is being put back onto these databases, then requests repeated removals, keeping your data yours forever. And best of all, you can cancel anytime, and they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can get it completely risk-free. Right now, you can get 60% off an annual plan by going to incogni.com and using the code JOJO. That's incogni.com/JOJO, and use the code JOJO at checkout. That's code JOJO. Live free from dangerous spam by using Incogni. That's incogni.com/JOJO for 60% off their annual plans. Okay, now let's get into it. Olivia, I am so glad you're here. How you doing?
I'm gonna be real with you. I got out of bed about 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
It's just one of those days, man.
Yeah, I hear you. Did you happen to see any of that press conference?
Which one?
The Epstein victims and survivors?
No, I didn't see it. How did it go?
It was incredibly powerful and sad and interesting because there was Thomas Massey, who no love for Thomas Massey, right? And I don't give a fuck, honestly, about his motivations right now. If it's about him wanting to stick it to Donald Trump, or if it's about him actually having some spine, some integrity, some morality. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, same argument, right? And Ro Khanna, this is, their legislation, their discharge position, etc. But seeing them there together was fascinating on its own because we don't see that every day, right? And I don't care about all their motivations, but they were flanked by several, nearly a dozen of Epstein's victims and survivors of what he did to them. And what was really shocking was that many of them name checked Donald Trump. Not so much that they went, right? Not so much that they said Donald Trump, I gave Donald Trump a massage or Donald Trump sexually assaulted me or abused me, but they name checked him so many times that one of them said not once but twice that Jeffrey Epstein's biggest brag, the person he boasted the most about being close friends with, someone whose 8x10 he had on his bedroom dresser, was Donald Trump. And then another survivor was asked about Donald Trump, and she said, I'm already scared enough. I'm not going to say more. Right?
During the press conference, she says this.
Yes. Which,
oh my God.
First of all, as a survivor of rape, just sharing your story to your inner circle. I didn't tell my sisters. I haven't actually had this conversation with two of my sisters ever because it is a hard conversation to have. I've only had this conversation with one of them. It's a hard conversation to have. So standing up there with this scandal, the one that so many powerful people don't want you talking about, standing up there and sharing your truth, like the stories they told were heartbreaking and devastating. And this is the other thing that was so fucked up about it. So while they're doing this, there's all these military planes buzzing overhead repeatedly, like every couple minutes, which is a little strange, don't you think? Because that's not like normal to happen in DC.
No, not that frequency. I mean, I've been in DC. I can't tell you how many times, and I've never seen anything like that.
No, and they had to stop talking to accommodate these military jets buzzing overhead over and over again. So just like, would that surprise you though? If you found out that Donald Trump called up Pete fucking Hegseth and said, dude, I want you to fly a bunch of, F-15s over these liars talking about this hoax. Like, would you be surprised if any of that happened?
It wouldn't surprise me if Pete Hegseth just decided to do it himself.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. That's a great point, actually. No, it wouldn't surprise me either. And I mean, it's like a freaking 9-layer dip of sexual abusers in this administration, including Hegseth, who settled with a woman for abusing her. Like, it's like, it wouldn't surprise you. Not, what he probably would have been like, hey buddy, did you see what I did? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then real fast, so then they go to the Oval, and of course, I don't know who he's hosting today. They asked him one question about this press conference, and he said it was a Democratic hoax. He said everything they're saying is all of those victims, everything that they stood up there and said to the world is a Democratic hoax. That was, and then no pushback, no follow-up questions. That was it.
What the fuck is wrong with these people? Like, it baffles me that there are genuinely people out there that are that twisted and evil that they would behave like that. But it baffles me out that there are people out there who will defend this. Like, there are people who will still say things like, well, he didn't do anything wrong, or, he wasn't part of it, or this is all alleged, or it's all a hoax. Like, you are not the brightest bulb in the pack. And it is just so disheartening to see people so willing to defend such a fucking monster.
Traveling back in time, I honestly and truly believed that the Access Hollywood tape recording was it. I thought, there's no way
Huh.
they stay in bed with this guy. I thought the John McCain shit. I thought when he mocked the disabled reporter, I thought, that's it. They're going to walk away. And now we've gotten to this point where he's basically filleting Putin on the world stage, this Republican Party of Ronald Reagan, in theory. And he very likely is at least a little bit implicated in a child sex trafficking ring, one of the most notorious of all time. And it's like, oh, well, it's okay. As long as we put the 10 Commandments up in school and bring back.
Man, his presidency is going to be so poorly remembered. It's not even fun. It's not even funny. Like, when people talk about Ronald Reagan, you know, if you ask my grandparents or my older family members, they'll be like, "Oh, Ronald Reagan was an amazing president." Well, you ask people a little bit younger, they'll be like, he wasn't very good. He had a couple things. Now you ask young people, like most young people who are kind of tapped into politics, if Ronald Reagan was a good president, and they'll tell you, like, oh, Ronald Reagan was a terrible president. And, like, it's taken, a couple of decades for that to really start to permeate in throughout the generation, just how bad of a president Ronald Reagan really was. It doesn't have to permeate with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So, like, the fact that we're already here, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, when the damage to our institutions has really truly set in, people are going to look back and be like, oh my God, like, what did we do? Like, there's a girl on TikTok who made a video and said, how long is it going to take us to undo all of the things he's done? I'm like, me and you, like, we're not going to be alive to see that. Like, the micro cuts and the gigantic bleeds are just throughout every institution in this country, and it's just going to take so much time and money to fix all that damage, assuming that it ends with Donald Trump.
Right.
If we find ourselves in a position where, and I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard this, a lot of people in MAGA world don't want JD Vance to be the nominee. They want Marco Rubio to be the nominee.
Really?
They want Marco Rubio to be the nominee. There's a lot, and I'm not talking about fringe, like, MAGA-based people. I'm talking about, like, actual people who work in the federal government, who work in the Trump administration. They don't want it to be JD Vance. They want it to be Marco Rubio.
I hadn't heard that.
And so, look, that's assuming that it's done with Trump. Marco Rubio or JD Vance could go in there, and they could continue to cause problems. So it's just, it's nonstop. Nonstop.
It's interesting because, I mean, JD Vance is so deeply unfucking likable. Like, he's just,
oh yeah,
he's an idiot. He's an asshole. He's a loser. He's lame. He can't even run without looking like a fucking idiot. Like, he's deeply, deeply unlikable. And Marco is the kind of person that doesn't inspire the kind of, like, sycophancy that a Donald Trump does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but he looks right now, the man of many hats, like he could be a really good heavy for Trump. Like, he's executing all of Trump's, well, whoever's agenda for Trump. And so it's interesting to me that they're like, no, we'd rather it be him. I mean, that likelihood of that happening with the powerful factions behind JD Vance, like Teal and Curtis Yarvin and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, though, like, people aren't storming the Capitol for JD Vance.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people, like there's this level of charisma and charm that Trump has that JD Vance just doesn't have. And, like, you can dump $1 bajillion behind him, but if you don't have the ability to, like, move people like that, it doesn't matter. And, like, maybe he'll be able to do it in the primary because the Trump shine will kind of shine off on him. But, like, in a general election, JD Vance isn't going to be able to move people in that way that Trump was. He's going to have a different kind of strategy to it. But you know what? I'll say this. I fear JD Vance a lot more than I fear Donald Trump. And a lot more than I feel Marco Rubio, because here's the thing. We know JD Vance grew up in not the best circumstances. We know, he grew up, his mother was a drug addict. There were times when they were dealing with poverty. Um, I grew up in very similar circumstances through a lot of my childhood. And when you grow up like that, even when you make it out, there is a mentality that sticks with you of, I will never go back to that. Like, I will never find myself in a position where I'm living like that ever again. I will do whatever it takes to not have to do that. For some people, like me, that looks like working 4 jobs and being like, I'm not doing this. But
Yeah.
for JD Vance, it's like on steroids of like, he has touched the mountaintop. Like, he is the vice president of the United States. He's going on vacations funded by the taxpayer year round. He has a Secret Service security detail. He has billionaires willing to finance anything he wants to do. Like, he is someone who has nothing to gain and everything to lose. And when you combine that with that mentality he has, those scars that are left on him mentally from his childhood, and I know what those scars feel like, I'm more afraid of that than I am of anything Donald Trump has ever done.
Yeah, because uh, to your point, he'll do anything they say. He'll do anything the powers that put him where he is, because
Yep.
he wouldn't have won that Senate seat without Peter
No.
Thiel. Yeah, he certainly wouldn't be vice president without, the Heritage Foundation, Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin, Elon Musk, etc. And they own his ass.
Yeah.
And to your point too, like, he has everything to lose, and he certainly isn't, restrained by some morality or some inner compass
Yeah.
of like purpose and responsibility and accountability. Fuck that. No, this guy will literally mutate into whatever version they want him to be. And that, you're right, that is terrifying, because some of the things that they want for this country, for the
Yeah.
world, are very, very fucked up and not good for average, regular, everyday folk, let alone even moderately like wealthy folk. It's like there's just white billionaire males and everybody else. And so you're right. And he's terrifying in that way. And Trump was really just a kind of a conduit. He was sort of just the delivery system for a JD Vance. And Marco Rubio, whatever he's cosplaying right now, I still think at the end of the day, the original iteration of Marco Rubio, the one who called Trump a con artist, the one who actually fucking hates Putin, the one who actually believes in government, I feel like he might surface again post-Trump, you know?
What one can hope. And I know what you're talking about. I remember this Marco Rubio
Yeah.
because when he was voted to be confirmed, I made a video that was kind of like, it says a lot about Marco Rubio's character as a lawmaker, as a senator, that every single one of his Democratic colleagues voted to confirm him. That says a lot about how he conducted himself while he was in the US Senate. And outside of saying some, Trumpian MAGA things here and there, and obviously atrocious policy that I fundamentally disagree with because I'm a Democrat, Marco Rubio was nowhere near the worst of the Republican Party. I think to your point, like, there are remnants of this man who you could tell, and if you watch this confirmation hearing, like, you could tell that this is a man who cared about the job that he was being nominated for. And it is one of the most disheartening, sobering reminders, um, of just how much our government has fallen in its credibility, that a man who um bipartisanly confirmed a long tenure in the US Senate, well liked by his colleagues, that man is the one who was aiding and cutting off USAID, is the one who is doing these things about PEPFAR. Like, that's so terrifying that just in a few short months, that's where we are. Because, like, and I remember, I worked on the Senate race here in Texas last year. It was very similar with Ted Cruz. Like, Ted Cruz, like, just to remind everyone, in 2016, Ted Cruz was just a few grasps away
Yep.
from being the Republican nominee for president until Donald Trump came around. And at the 2016 national convention, so much so he picked a running mate, by the way.
Yeah.
At the 2016 Republican National Convention, Ted Cruz stood on stage and refused to endorse Donald Trump.
Yep.
He refused to endorse him. He encouraged people to vote their conscience, and he was booed off the stage at the
Yep.
Republican National Convention.
Yep.
And in my opinion, the day that the Republican Party, the modern Republican Party, truly died. It was not when Donald Trump was elected. It was not when he was picked as a nominee. The day that the Republican Party as we know it truly died was when Donald Trump came to Texas in 2018 to campaign for Ted Cruz. Because that was when one of our highest profile Republicans, who was supposed to be the next coming of the Mitt Romney section of the party, completely bended the knee to Donald Trump just so he could hold on to his power.
Yeah. And by the way, Carly Fiorina is as a Trivial Pursuit question answer now at this point, and a little more. But
Yeah.
I remember when Ted Cruz stood up and did that at the RNC, and I remember how viciously he was booed. And I remember at that time that he was among the handful. It was him and Rubio and Lindsey fucking Graham, who were really calling this shit out. I mean, Donald Trump mocked his wife's looks. He called him a narcissist. He called him a liar, right? And then he did that at the RNC. He was roundly mocked for it. And a week later, maybe a little more, I don't know if you remember this, the most viral photo of Ted Cruz outside of the gif of either him eating his own booger on stage or his daughter rejecting a hug was a picture of him sitting at a phone bank with Donald Trump's campaign shit behind him, looking like literally like someone had ripped out his spine and like was just dangling it in front of him. Like it was
like
terrific.
If you're Ted Cruz, like imagine, like you worked your entire life. You go to, I think you went to Harvard Law School.
Yeah.
You are incredible at what you do. Because, like, look, I'll give Ted Cruz this. For someone who yields the constitutional in an evil way, Ted Cruz is one of the most consequential constitutional lawyers that the Republican Party has in the U.S. government. Like when he was the comptroller of Texas. Like Ted Cruz has been involved in a lot of really major lawsuits, and for what he's done his job well.
Yeah.
In terms of aiding them in court. And so this man who, went to Harvard Law School, he was a great lawyer for the right. He was the comptroller, and then they pushed him into that Senate seat. They pushed Ted Cruz into that Senate seat. And he beats someone in the primary, and he gets to the Senate, and he becomes this kind of like, this guy, and everyone's like, what's Ted Cruz doing? And like, you get all the way there, and then a reality TV star decides that he wants to be president. A guy who has all these accusations, failed businesses, just a slimy, disgusting, garbage person. And you've worked your entire life for this, and he beats you, and he calls your wife ugly, and he calls you a narcissist, and then you have to sit there and make phone calls for him. I would look miserable too. And I think it fundamentally broke something in Ted Cruz's head, because now he's turned into this troll, which, like, whatever you need to do to stay relevant, I guess, Ted. And it's just, oh God, it's just so tragical. It's like watching a car crash as you pass it by. Like, you just can't help but look.
It's so true. And no love for James Comey, but James Comey wrote about how Donald Trump eats your soul in little bites, right? Like he's just constantly coming for more and more and more until you got, Ted Cruz turning into this like super fan where he's flocking to Mar-a-Lago and helping trying to overturn an election that Donald Trump lost. I mean, the irony, it is, he called him a serial killer. Donald Trump called Ted Cruz a fucking serial killer. He said his dad
killed JFK.
Right?
Yeah.
and is calling his
Yeah.
wife ugly. And this guy is basically tattooing his name on his
Oh
forehead. But
God.
while we're on Texas, just with the last few minutes that we have, I want to talk to you because you are on the ground in Texas, and I want to talk to you about these overreaches that the Texas Republicans, overreach is like a very gentle way of putting this, because your reality down there is already bad enough with this
Yeah.
supermajority these assholes have. But now Ken Infidelity Paxton is trying very hard to get prayer returned to your schools. The 10 Commandments are already up on the walls, if I recall correctly. Not to mention what the Texas Republicans have done with your maps, which has triggered a response from our guy, Gavin Newsom, who you killed it with in an interview that we did together. By the way, you were the game changer in that interview. But talk to me about Texas Republicans and what is going to happen to the people in Texas and the lives that you're actually living right now if all of this fuckery ends up going into motion.
Yeah, Texas, God, it really is just a beast of its own. You know, I just wrote an op-ed in the Houston Chronicle about Gavin
Congrats.
Newsom too. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Saying basically, thank you to this governor for working harder to fight for us than our own government is, which is a sad reality. Texas has been controlled by Republicans for 30 years, so longer than I've been alive.
Damn.
Um, and it shows in the outcomes of people living in the state. Before the One Big Beautiful bill was passed and signed into law by Donald Trump, it's going to cut millions of people off their health care. Texas already had one of the highest coverage gaps in the nation, and it was purely because our governor refused to expand Medicaid. Our state legislature refused to expand Medicaid. Um, we already had issues with our public school system. We just recently passed school vouchers, and there's this old saying, as goes Texas, so goes the nation. And it is so true because Texas is such a large state, both in size and population. It really is this like petri dish for Republicans to test things out. And if you look at all of the really terrible things that Donald Trump is doing, they've already tried some model of that in Texas, banning sanctuary cities. Texas did that back in, oh God, I think 2017, 2018. Sending ICE after people for suspicion. They did that last session, SB4. Banning abortion. They did that in 2021, a civil bounty abortion ban. Destroying the Department of Education. They already did that. They've had TEA take over public school boards here in Texas. So, like, all of these things that Donald Trump wants to do on a national level, they've already been done in Texas. And what that leaves you with is one of the highest rates of uninsured people in the country, with a large amount of preventable deaths that happen here every year. What it leaves you with is a rising infant and maternal mortality rate, which we have had ever since the civil bounty abortion ban went into law. What it leaves you with is cancer clusters because of environmental pollution and companies just not being held accountable because the state government refuses to do it. And what it leaves you with is decreasing literacy rates and high teacher turnover because our teachers are not paid enough and our public schools are not well funded. And, I was born and raised in Texas. My family has lived in Texas for over 100 years. And Texas culturally is a lovely place to live because the people here are so resilient because of all of the tragedies that we have to go through just so frequently, whether it be natural disaster, whether it be the fact that 3 of the 10 deadliest mass shootings in American history have happened in Texas while Greg Abbott has been governor. We have had all of these tragedies happen that shape us. And so it makes people here very friendly. And there's a very strong sense of community here. But that strong sense of community and that friendliness and that willingness to help your neighbor out, it comes from the fact that our government is failing to do its job. And that's why people feel so helpless. And it's why, even though we have 18 million eligible voters in Texas, only 9 to 10 million of them show up each election. And that's where we lead with, Greg Abbott being governor. In 2024, it's how we have Kamala Harris win the Harris County by 5.5 points. But in 2024, Joe Biden won Harris County by 13 points. We had 1 million eligible voters in Harris County not vote in 2024. And it's because of gerrymandering. It is because of the way these districts are drawn. People feel like they have no say in their government. They feel like their vote doesn't make a difference. So they just stay home. And that's the intent. That's why these people do this. They want people to stay home. They want them to be miserable. And if they don't like it here, they just want them to leave. They are trying to socially engineer a permanent conservative majority in the state of Texas.
I mean, it's absolutely terrifying, but it's not, you know this very well. It's not going to end with Texas. Texas is this petri dish, to your point. Texas, by the way, to your point, was ahead of Dobbs in many ways on these extreme abortion bans. And because of that, we've seen numbers that we haven't seen on a national level as much because we don't have as much data, but because of the Abbott and his special brand of awfulness, we've seen the impact on infant mortality and on maternity rates. And it's terrifying. And it's certainly not pro-life. That's the other thing. That Greg Abbott, like you said, 3 of the deadliest shootings, that the fact that he went to court to make sure they could continue to drown migrant children in the Rio Grande and razor wire. Like, this guy lofts himself up as pro-life, but nothing that he does, nothing they do is actually pro-life at all. To the contrary.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. One of the first public speeches I ever gave was in 2021 at the state capitol, is after the civil bounty abortion ban went into effect. And I say civil bounty because the way this bill was written, all of the punitive measures were done in civil court. So, like, if I found out if I found out that you were helping someone in Texas get an abortion, if you drove them to the doctor, if you were a doctor or a nurse who had been involved, I could take you to court for $10,000. And so that went into effect, and it effectively banned abortion in the state of Texas. Before the Dobbs decision, which triggered our trigger ban. But, I said this after that went into effect in 2021 at the state capitol. I said, no matter how much you claim to be pro-life, the blood on your hands says otherwise. And with men like Greg Abbott, we are not talking about hypothetical death or hypothetical suffering. We are talking about people who have already died. We are talking about children who have already died in mass shootings. We are talking about women who have already died trying to give birth to their children. We are talking about people who have died because they could not access healthcare. They could not afford their medications. These are real life stories, and these are real lives that have been lost because of Greg Abbott and because of our Republican state legislature. And until people en masse realize that that's the truth, maybe it takes it happening to them for them to realize it. But until people start realizing that that's the truth and start getting their asses to the polls, this is what's going to continue to happen, not just in Texas, but across the country. And if it's happening in Texas, it's not going to stay here because, like I said, as goes Texas, so goes the nation.
So, yeah, with that, get your asses to the polls as long as we have polls to get to. And fucking amen to Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker and Kathy Hochul and Wes Moore and other governors who are standing up to this shit right now.
Amen to that.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia. Thank you for joining me. It's always awesome to see you. I don't know when we match up in fantasy football, but it's not this week or next week, so hopefully soon.
You know what? We'll see what happens. I gotta beat Chris Mowry first.
I got him next week.
Well, you know what? I gotta say, I feel a lot better about my chances now. With you two in the league, knowing that I might not actually be the loser. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you, Olivia. And let's go. Game on. I'm gonna win this whole league. I promise you. Just watch me. I'm a sleeper. When I was pregnant with my son, I won my fantasy league and my fantasy baseball league that same year. So I know I have it in me. I just have to pay more attention.
I believe in you.
Thank you. I believe in you. Let's go 1-2. Thank you for joining me today. Very last minute, no notice of any kind, but you are the best. Awesome. I love you. And I'm very glad to be in this fight with you.
Well, thanks for having me, JoJo.
Olivia, thank you for showing up, staying real, and giving everyone listening something to feel fired up about and maybe a little less alone. The world may be a mess, but if this conversation proves anything, it's that giving up is not an option, and underestimating young people is a truly terrible mistake. If this episode moved you, made you laugh, or made you think, share it, rate it, and follow Sanish for more unfiltered truth and solidarity. Until next time, keep fighting, keep laughing, and keep your hope stubborn.